I'd like to share a terrifying story from St. John Bosco's youth, which, although brief, shows how brave he was and that he took no stock in superstitions. The Miracles and Prophecies of St. John Bosco, a project of America Needs Fatima. I'm your host, Matthew Miller. Subscribe for new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. St. John Bosco's mother, Margaret, had always been careful never to tell her children terrifying stories that might overexcite their imagination. Unfortunately, many mothers imprudently do so, and thereby rear cowards instead of men of courage. One autumn, John went for a brief vacation to the home of his mother's family in Caprillo, where Margaret customarily spent several days to help with the vintage. His grandfather, uncles, and aunts gave him a hearty welcome. As night drew on and they were waiting for supper, someone began to spin a tale about how, in times gone by, they used to hear different weird sounds coming from the attic. The sounds were either of long or brief duration, but they always had a hair-raising effect on those who heard them. Everyone maintained that only the devil himself would have been able to upset people in such a manner. John refused to believe such idle tales, and insisted that it was all due to some natural cause, such as the wind, a polecat, or something like that. Since it was already dark, someone lit the lamps. The room in which they were talking had a ceiling with many rafters. This formed the floor of a large attic, used as a barn and storehouse for other crops. Suddenly they heard the noise of a falling object, like a big basket of bowls, followed by a slow, dull sound that traversed the space above their heads from one corner to another. Everyone stopped talking, and a somber silence fell on the group. When the sinister sound was repeated, their faces grew pale. "What can it be?" they whispered to one another. "Let's go outside," Margaret said to her son. "Come on, a sudden fright might do you harm." "No," John said, "I want to see what it is." The noise continued at intervals, and given the hour it was so inexplicable as to be terrifying indeed. They all stared at each other quizzically. "Did anybody leave the door open?" someone asked. "No, it's locked," answered another. "What could it be then?" John stood up resolutely, lit a lamp, and said, "Let's go and take a look." "Listen," everyone said, "let's wait for tomorrow. It's prudent." "What? Are you afraid?" interrupted John. And so saying, he made his way to the attic. John pushed open the door. He entered the attic. He held the lantern up and looked about him. He could see nothing. All was still. Some of his relatives peeped in from the door, only one or two having dared to enter after him. Then they all gave a startled cry, and some fled. Something very strange was going on. A wheat sieve in a corner was moving of its own accord and advancing toward them, coming to a sudden halt in response to their terror-stricken shrieks. But after the shouts died down, it resumed its movements and didn't halt until it had reached John's feet. The boy stepped back. Then he handed his lantern to the person nearest him, who, terrified, let it fall, plunging the room into darkness. He called for another lantern and stood it on top of an old chair. Then, bending down, he touched the sieve. "Don't touch it! Don't touch it!" someone yelled from the doorway. John paid no heed and lifted it off the ground. A great roar of laughter filled the room. Underneath the sieve stood a big hen. This is what had happened. Some grains of wheat had become lodged in the grill of the sieve that was tilted against the wall. Lured by the grains, a hen had begun to pick at these tempting morsels of food. The sieve had unexpectedly toppled over and had imprisoned the hen. Captive and hungry, the hen had tried to escape, and because it was unable to rid itself of the great weight, it had battered itself against the sides. Thus the hen had pushed its not-too-heavy prison from one end of the attic to the other. The silence of the night, the floor made of rafters, and the general fear had given the noise a particularly eerie quality. Happiness succeeded their panic, for which the hen paid dearly. Grabbing the bird, Margaret said, "You won't frighten us like that anymore." So saying, she wrung its neck, and then plucked and cooked it. "The goblin's in the cook-pot," they all shouted in unison as they prepared to sit down, quite unexpectedly, to a magnificent supper. No one felt like going to bed, so after having been freed of their fear, they spent the night in a frolicsome mood as they watched their vats and barrels. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you'd like to enroll in our Saturday Mass intentions for the promoters of St. John Bosco, just click on the logo above me here. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you.